Hey, just a quick note before we begin. When we recorded this episode, the release plans for the second Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel film, Lost Butterfly, were not yet known. Since then, it has been more or less confirmed that the movie is going to be released by Fathom Events rather than Azoland Pictures, which means that it's actually incredibly unlikely that it's going to reach Canadian theaters. As we discuss in the episode, this is a really bad sign since the first Heaven's Feel film actually performed extremely well in Canada. If you want to see this second movie in theaters, I strongly recommend reaching out to Aniplex of America through social media as soon as possible to make sure you get the message through loud and clear. Hey everyone, welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. Every year we do an episode where we look back on the past year of anime theatrical releases in Canada, and we're going to be doing that in this episode for 2018. Joining me, as he always does for these episodes, is Randy. Randy, would you mind introducing yourself just for any new listeners who might not be familiar with you?
Hey, I'm Randy. I've been part of Zonan Canada since way back, almost. I don't even want to think how long it's been. But yeah.
Yeah, you were from the old forum for the back when it was a blog.
I sure was.
I think you were on episode 2 of the podcast, so
yeah,
you've been around. We're going to be looking back on Canadian anime theatrical releases for 2018, both in terms of just the movies we were able to catch and just the current state of theatrical releases. Randy, if you were to use one word to describe the past year in Canadian theatrical anime releases, what would that word be?
It's tricky because we got a lot of really good stuff, but we're also, towards the end of the year, we started seeing a big drop-off of what we were getting. So initially excellent, and by the end, disappointing.
Yeah, I was thinking more like Catastrophe, but or Bloodbath. Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion a little bit. The whole situation has really bothered me.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, there's been a huge, very quick, very jarring fall off of reliability for the theatrical releases of anime. What makes it worse is that 2017, as well as 2016, they were such great years. We got so many great films. Nearly everything that got released in the United States also got a Canadian release, to some degree, to some extent or another. However, in 2018, I tried counting. I think there were somewhere between 25 to 30 theatrical releases of anime of some sort in the United States. We got maybe half of them in Canada in 2018. And that's if you count film festival screenings and cases where a film only screened in one or two cities.
Right.
Or just one city, which happened with quite a few major titles, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty unfortunate because theatrical anime has been a very important part just of anime's presence in Canadian media for the past few years, since we don't have stuff on TV. And, of course, having stuff on TV in some kind of Toonami-like capacity is very important. And theatrical releases really offered a highly accessible, kind of highly visible exposure for anime. They'd show up in major and a lot of smaller cities. They tended to be well promoted. And I think most importantly, at least from what I've observed in many of the theatrical releases I've gone to, they very frequently attract people who aren't necessarily anime fans. Or there are people who are kind of outside of that usual demographic, or people who may be more curious about anime but aren't going to go to a convention or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
The crowds are always really interesting to see for whatever movie I'm seeing. I always have a really big fascination with what is the crowd for this movie actually compared to what it is on the internet. And there's been a few surprises, especially with the idol stuff, I'd say.
Yeah, that's something that's actually been consistently reliable, is those live delay screenings for idol performances that are like
Mm-hmm.
4 hours long and have no subtitles. We have been getting, I think we have been getting those more reliably than we've been getting anime films.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up in our discussions. Is that we can reliably count on the idol concerts to come out here, even some of the more obscure ones, like the. Well, I'm supposed to get into that before we actually get started with the actual movies.
Yeah.
We had 3 Love Live shows, only one of which I went to. We had the third and the fourth lives came out this year. I didn't go to either of those just because I was feeling a bit of a burnout. And my roommates actually got to go to the fourth one in Japan when they went, and so I was too jealous to go see that one. But we got the Unit Carnival one, which is a bunch of the subgroups within the Aqua group doing a little short concerts, which was really cool to see. But the actual one that I really liked the most was the Bang Dream Fifth Live 2-concert series, which was really interesting because the Bang Dream Girls Band Party is a franchise where there's 5 idol groups in the actual show. They're not idols, they're bands. But for all intents and purposes, they're idols. I think there's 5. There might be 6 now. And they play their own instruments, 2 of the groups do. So each of the shows, one of those 2 bands did a performance, and I found it really, really interesting and really good. These ones were interesting because they actually subtitled the concerts besides the songs.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. They kind of had to. Because
I guess they're getting more popular, so they can kind of justify that measure. I know when they first started doing those, I don't think they had any idea of how much money they'd make or how they'd perform.
No, and the Love Live ones are still unsubtitled too.
Yeah.
Just the part, like, they had to do the Bang Dream ones because there's about each concert had 4 or 5 15 to 20 minute segments where one of the band members would do something to train for the concert, which was really fun to watch. One of them had to boost her courage by doing street performances. So she went to a bunch of places and performed live acoustically. Like, first it was the office, then it was a street outside the office, then it was Shibuya, and then she ended up performing in the same place where she had performed when she was a teenager. And one of the guys who used to watch her ended up walking by and noticing her. And so she got really emotional because this guy who had been supporting her for the whole time had just randomly come up and met her again. So it was full of those kind of things, which I found really endearing, and I really enjoyed that part of the concert. It was probably, as far as the idol concerts go, it's probably my favorite one I've seen so far was the Bang Dream ones, which kind of surprised.
That whole franchise just kind of came out of nowhere, but I heard they had announced it, and I wondered how well it was going to do. But I heard people talking about it all the time. I don't go to those myself, but I think the one in Vancouver was fairly well attended from what I've gathered. So it'll be interesting to see if those keep going. Also, this should come as a strong sign that the J-pop idol kind of industry and movement should try to be making more of a headway in Canadian cities than they currently are, but it seems we're kind of in a limbo situation with that.
Well, at this point, there's a few, there's the dancing groups, and there's a few sister idol groups that have popped up in Vancouver. I know there's one for sure that's popped up recently that's getting popular in that respect. So it's all pretty. I'm curious to see how it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's for amateur groups, there's tons of them here in Vancouver. There's so many. But it's just interesting that they don't. I know that idol groups they'll do performances in some major Californian cities and maybe New York every now and again. But it seems they don't want to break outside of those markets. Hopefully that'll change. I'm not a big marketing person, so I don't really know what types of marketing data they use to determine what cities or what kind of degree of rollout you'd use with something, like whether it's an idol concert or idol performance or an anime film screening for how much coverage something like that is going to get in Canada. Based on the way that many of these theatrical releases for anime are handled, I don't think they really have consistent information that they're going by. Because these things tend to be handled even at when we were getting films consistently. There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to why one film would be getting a lot of exposure and another film wouldn't. Minor titles would get very wide releases across, very different Cineplex theaters, whereas more major releases would get shunted entirely. And where a lot of that is just kind of coming to a headway. Just in terms of idols, again, are there any like Love Live films, like anime films, lined up or anything like that in the near future that we could be getting a theatrical treatment for?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up at the end. We have the Love Live Sunshine movie just came out a few weeks ago.
Okay.
In Japan, and if we get a similar situation to what happened before, I'm going to be very disappointed. In that Canada didn't get their Love Live movie screenings until after the Blu-rays had come out.
Yeah.
So our audience was very, very dead.
Yeah.
Hopefully in this case we'll get a simultaneous release with the American release, or at least very close.
Has an American release been announced for that?
No, but it's only a matter of time.
It's going to be interesting because I think those live delays that we've been getting for idol performances, that creates a very strong argument for actually getting the next Love Live film in theaters here. So if we don't wind up getting it, it's going to. Well, I was going to say it's definitely going to show that there's something awry with the way that this stuff is being organized. But I think it's pretty clear that there is something awry right now.
I think it depends on who's the distributor for the movie. If it's Azaland, we're for sure going to get it.
Yeah.
But what's likely going to happen is that Funimation's going to get it. And Funimation is a little spotty on what we get, what we don't.
Increasingly so.
We've been okay a little bit with some of the Funimation stuff, but as a whole, I'm not hopeful.
Yeah.
If Funimation gets it.
I don't know. You mention, distributors, but it's hard to pinpoint where the blame really lies for the big decline that we've seen in the past year. A big part of it is that a lot of companies are opting to use Fathom events for films instead of companies like 11 Arts or Azoland, who generally do a push in the U.S. and Canada, but that's unfortunately starting to change now. And Fathom Events, if people aren't familiar, it is a partnership between U.S.-only theater chains. They're actually seem to be hosting most of the theatrical anime in the U.S. right now. I think they show up in like Regal Cinemas and a few others. I would argue that it's kind of like a Hulu-fication of theatrical anime in a way, because unlike Azoland or 11 Arts, Fathom Events literally can't extend their services to Canada because none of those theater chains exist up here. I think in some cases, let's say with Funimation, they have to make some kind of extra distribution effort to get it in theaters. I don't know what partners they work with. I know that they, of course, the My Hero Academia film did get released here, and quite a small release, but it did get up here. So in some cases, they're willing to work out some kind of deal. I don't know how they make it work, but I think the problem here is that they've now sort of fallen into a pattern where additional effort is required to get films in theaters here. I think the reason we had gotten so much in the past, and there have been, since these screenings started with, I think they basically started with the Evangelion films back almost a decade ago.
Yeah, I think that's about where it started.
And like in those situations, we would very frequently the films would show up in like more theaters in Canada than they did in the U.S. And I don't mean that percentage-wise. Like literally more screens were showing like those Ava 1.1 and 2.2 films than were happening in the U.S. And that's just it's not because they were doing a harder push here. That's just kind of how the ball rolled at the time in terms of the distribution deal that they were able to strike up. And I think the way I see it, the reason we got so much was just because it was convenient. It just fell into like having a wider Canadian release or getting it released into a lot of those films released into a lot of theaters up here. It just kind of fell into the strategy that they were deploying in the U.S. So they just went along with it. But now that more companies are working with Fathom Events, that creates extra work to have to get films out in Canada to any degree. And I think, and this can be said with many things in regards to U.S. companies distributing anime in Canada. They will, they will serve Canada as long as it's convenient for them. But the second they have to do any kind of additional work, they'll just pull out. Or as we've seen with actually 11 Arts, I was surprised. They stated recently that they did the Hikara-san films, and with part 2 they said, well, ask your local theaters if they'll pick it up. And 11 Arts has been very reliable. I think they have generally been the best company for dealing with Canada for releasing films up here. They did, of course, Hikara-san part 1 earlier this year. They did the Makia release. But with Hikara-san part 2 and Liz and the Blue Bird most recently, they were not able to pull off those releases, and they have been asking the audience, well, basically, we'll talk to your local theater to pick them up. And just like, this is supposed to be your job to push these films. You're the Canadian distributor. You should be pushing. You should be doing the work, contacting these theaters, getting them to pick up the film. But you're making the fans do all the work. Because it's now this situation where you have to do additional work in order to serve Canada. It doesn't just easily fall into the strategy like it used to. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating based on the little we know, because we don't actually seem to know that much, because there's so many factors that go into this whole theatrical distribution thing. I don't know if you have any additional insight on this, because I know you've worked with these companies a little closer.
I don't have too much more insight. I just know that I work for ICON, which is a convention in Manitoba. We have a partnership with 11 Arts to get some of the movies at our cons. And for example, this past summer we had the first Hikara-san for one of our main events, which was really nice. I went to see that, and I saw that one in theaters. I found it extremely charming.
It was so charming. I love it so much.
It's definitely feels like an old shoujo series, slightly updated for modern filming techniques and whatnot. But I found it a nice throwback to the big drama pieces of older shoujo, which was really fun.
Wonderful retro shoujo melodrama. But it seems that they will recreate like the style of storytelling. They seem very reluctant these days to recreate the art style of like 70s and 80s shoujo, which I find very disappointing. You only see that done in parody now. But no one will ever sincerely adopt that style anymore, which is it's disappointing. With Hikara-san, I found it I didn't know anything about it going in, apart from the fact that it was adapted from a shoujo manga. But I really greatly enjoyed it. I was surprised that 11 Arts was able to pull off such a wide release for such a niche title. And I was actually looking at the box office intakes for all the anime released this year. It was unsurprisingly at the very bottom. Because but somehow they managed to wrangle that release. Just in regards to the film itself, obviously it's adapting a fairly long manga, and I kind of wish they had done a little more with the detective arc around the end. It was just, when you look at it as a film, it seemed like a weird thing to kind of throw in there at the end when you could it was a whole thing in the manga, obviously. But
it's one of those problems that come across when you're adapting a long running series into 2 movies, is that lots of the very important plot lines for like a later revelation just can't get the screen time it needs to really develop properly, but it's a necessary element going forward in that story, so it needs to be there. It's one of those weird issues that happen a lot in lots of these long running manga to movie, manga to live action adaptations that happens it's kind of unavoidable in terms of the storytelling that anime films tend to take.
Yeah. But 11 Arts did strike up a deal with Cineplex for Hikara-san, which, again, it goes back to, like, how on earth does this film get a wide release, but, something more, that really should be more popular doesn't. And I can't help but get this kind of creeping feeling that the failure or the poor performance of Hikara-san may have damaged 11 Arts' ability to get other movies out in Cineplex, because that often seems to be the way it plays out.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too, and it looks like Hikara is Makuya is the last 11 Arts that was really big here. But I can definitely see that Hikara-san is probably a indicator of the lessening of what they had. 11 Arts also put out, I think they put out Nanaha Reflection as well earlier
They
this year.
did, yes. Actually, that's one I missed on my list. But they did pull off that release as well.
Which I also saw, and I'm a Nanaha fan from way back. I think mecha, but Mahou Shoujo is such a interesting concept. And watching the characters that I liked before in this new movie, in this new great animation was really fun. But we're absolutely not going to see Nanaha Reflection Part 2 in theaters. I doubt that with every fiber of my being. I really want to see it, but me and my roommate, when we went to the movie, the whole car ride, we just couldn't believe that we were going to see a Nanoha movie in the theater.
Yeah.
It was just kind of unbelievable. And at the time, that was early February or March. We were like, oh, this is the best time for anime movies ever. And precursor to the slowing down of everything.
Yeah. Whatever magic 11 Arts was pulling off to get films like that in theaters, it seems to have been either they pushed it too far, or some external change has happened that is not allowing them to pull that off anymore. Either way, it's really unfortunate. In terms of Ozoland, which is another company that tends usually to work with Aniplex or Sentai Filmworks a lot of the time, they announced that the film for Love Chunibyo and Other Delusions, Take on Me, was going to get a Canadian release, but then they, for the first time I've seen this happen, they actually went back on that announcement and said, oh, sorry, we're not going to be releasing it in Canada. It seems that not only did whatever release strategy they were planning not work out in that case, that also they said that you can't even recommend it to your local theater. We're just not allowing it to be released at all. So I can't even begin to speculate on why that is the case. On one hand, it could be that they tried to get a deal with Cineplex, and when they couldn't get the deal with Cineplex, they just weren't willing to do anything. Or it could be that possibly even just that their Japanese parent company is not allowing them to do it, or I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to get any information out of them regarding that. But
no, I don't think so.
It was definitely a kind of fishy development.
Yeah, it's making me believe that anything Sentai gets movie-wise, it's not going to stand a chance over here. At this point, have
they gotten anything out in Canada? I think so. We got a short piece a few years ago.
We got short piece.
That was Sentai.
Yeah, we got Girls in Panzer.
We did get Girls in Panzer. That's true. Yes.
Yes. But those are the two that I can think of off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, but it just shows that there's no factor that can firmly establish whether or not we can expect to get an anime film released. I don't think even the way, even if something had a previous installment that was successful, I don't know if that's going to guarantee it either. Like the Heaven's Feel film for Fate. I think we already talked about this on the show because technically it was a release from last year.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a holdover when we got it in Canada. But I mean, it did extremely well. It sold out in almost every theater
It was very popular in my theater too. I forgot that we talked about it before. But I'm just looking
or
back.
It may have been in an episode without you. If you have some thoughts on that, just go ahead and share it.
I must have been in the episode. No, I just really liked how Heaven's Feel was a very just the way it started off with a very slow character-based story before it got into all the action. I found that really, really interesting. And then the action itself was absolutely phenomenal. I was not expecting it to be told as artfully as it kind of was, with a lot more nuance than I had expected. And I'm really, really hope that we get more Heaven's Feel.
Yeah, it translates the whole story out very well into theatrical language or cinematic language, which is like I've heard people claim that you have to read. Well, of course, there's always going to be people who will claim that you have to read the visual novel for Fate before you can watch the movies. I don't feel that was the case at all with Heaven's Feel. Obviously, it's not for newcomers. You have to be familiar with the franchise or have to have seen some kind of adaptation of one of the roots at least.
Yeah, I took my partner with me to see it, and he had no idea what was happening because the main meeting between Shiro and Saber is told over the credits.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
If you were expected to know it already.
Yeah, you have to at least have Unlimited Blade Works under your belt before going into that one, which is fine. I don't think there's any problem with that.
Yeah, I do see Heaven's Feel as a situation where it's popular enough that we almost are for sure getting it.
It's going to be a good test, I think.
Yeah, I think that'll be the test.
Like,
to see
are they actually
what's happening here?
Are they actually paying attention to what is popular here and what sells here, or are they just making arbitrary decisions based on questionable data? Yeah. Well, that's going to be the big test.
Yeah.
And also, are they gonna have Fathom Events release it in the U.S. or Azoland? I'm hoping that Azoland gets that one because it will increase our chances. But see, there's so many weird factors. You cannot. It's completely unpredictable. But my fingers are crossed that we'll get that second Heaven's Feel film.
I think so.
Yeah. Going back to Funimation, I think in 2018 the big red flag for me that there was going to be something seriously wrong going on this year was when we didn't get that first Eureka 7, a High Evolution film.
Right.
Because that came out, I think, like February in the U.S. And right from the beginning, they said that it would be getting a release in the United States, and they never gave any kind of definitive statement about whether or not Canada would be getting it. And I found that really worrying because, Eureka 7, of course, was not the most successful show on Bionix. But it was nonetheless, it was a show that ran on YTV, which, if you're paying any degree of attention, if you're doing any kind of market research or, keeping track of the Canadian market to any degree whatsoever, you should know that, and you should know that if a whole show ran on YTV, that should qualify it for at least some kind of limited run, theatrically.
Yeah,
logically,
definitely.
But,
it's definitely like the biggest oversight from Funimation this year.
I think so, for sure.
Easily.
The reviews of that film have not been very good.
No.
I really only want to see like the first 10 minutes of it, which is where they put the new kind of backstory event at the beginning, documenting the first summer of love. That's really the only part I want to see. I could watch that and then walk out.
Yeah.
But the big problem is that there's no other way to watch it. You can't rent it. You can't stream it. You have to buy the physical disc. That's the only way you can watch it legally in Canada right now. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to invest. This is not a movie I want to invest in. It's a movie I just want to see. And they're not really they're not making it available in any way. And I mean, it raises all kind of questions. Like, are they just focusing less overall in Canada, or are they just unaware of the fact that this show ran on YTV and should be getting more of a push? I think that would actually be the more worrying thing in my mind.
I think it's probably both, honestly. Yeah. And yeah, the fact that you can't watch those movies without actually buying a disc is a bit of a problem, especially since Funimation has their own streaming app where they should be putting a lot of films on, and they haven't yet. It's, as far as streaming platforms go, Funimation falling behind High Dive at this point because High Dive puts out all their movies.
Yeah, and I mean, now that Funimation is split from Verve and Crunchyroll, they have to be extremely competitive because they have a huge disadvantage because they have the worst platform of the three. I mean, they introduced downloading on the app, which I will give them props for that for sure. But like, still, they have easily the worst app out of everyone.
I'd say so.
They have it is an uphill battle. So I think they're still sharing a lot of content with Crunchyroll as we're seeing this season.
Yes,
but soon they're gonna start getting exclusives like the Fruits Basket anime, the new one. That's gonna be a big test for them. Are they gonna attract subscribers with that? It's hard to say. We'll see.
I mean, they'll attract me with Fruits Basket for sure.
I'll watch it on their app. I don't know if I'm going to subscribe to it. I'll wait a week. I'll wait a week for those episodes.
Yeah, we'll see. They were initially the first people who were announced for Boogie Pop. Yes. And I was like, well, I'm guessing in Funimation, but then Crunchyroll got it as well. So, I still don't super need Funimation yet. The free app works just fine for me now.
Yeah. In fact, you can access more of the back catalog with the Funimation free app than you can with Crunchyroll. But we're not talking about that today. But getting films on their app would be a good way of getting subscribers because that's a big reason of why getting these films out in theaters is important. Obviously, the number of cities that come out, they're only going to come out in major to medium-sized cities, so that restricts who's able to see them. But at least it creates a way to see the films that isn't buying a disc. And streaming anime films continues to be a big problem in general. They're just they're just not made available, and a lot of the times you can't rent them on like iTunes or Google Play either.
Yeah, which is a big problem because I think anime movies are one of the best ways to actually get into anime over a series. Because the series is a big long commitment. A movie is nice, bite-sized, good way to enjoy it. That's how I ingest lots of my shonen anime. Is I'll watch just the movies for them because I think the movies give me the same feeling as the series would. Like
it's the CPM business model. Just why bring over the series? We can just bring over the OVAs and movies out of context. People will watch them.
But so as far as Funimation went, I'm looking over my list and it looks like they had about 3 or 4 movies this year. They had the Gintama live action. They did the Gintama live action? I believe it was them. It would make, I want to say it's them. I could be completely off base. But it seems like it's a Funimation thing, the Gintama. No, cause
it was,
yeah.
Ozoland, distributed it.
Oh, it was Ozoland.
They partnered with Well Go USA, who I've never heard of. I don't think Funimation was involved with that one.
Oh, interesting. I
thought it was an Ozoland triumph. In that case, and I did actually I know that I saw the home video release pop up in stores too. So whoever Well Go USA uses for their distribution, they did a good job.
Yeah, so that's what it was because I saw the movie and I just assumed since Funimation usually gets their stuff into Walmart that it was a Walmart thing, but I guess it was not. I thought Gintama live action was really cool. I went into it thinking it was just like a side story like most anime movies are, but I went with my friends and they were talking about it in context of the manga, how it's a manga story, and I thought that was surprising to me. I really enjoyed it. I thought Oguri Shun plays Gintoki and he's really good in it. I think that whole cast was pretty fun. It's hard to translate a comedy like that to live action, but I think they did the best job they could have possibly done. I found Gintama much better than I would have thought, and I like going to see live action anime movies in general, and this is one of the topper tier ones.
My expectations for that Gintama live action would have been just bottom of the barrel completely, but it sounds like it's worth checking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, if that wasn't Funimation, I think they only did Bebop and My Hero Academia here.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, they did the Cowboy Bebop release, which was not well promoted, but we did get that, and My Hero Academia, and of course, the Broly film is coming out. Oh, the Broly, the
Oh yeah,
Broly
the
double
Broly
feature
release.
for the old films,
Mhm.
which I think that actually was a fairly solid release.
Yeah.
So actually, if we're breaking it down in terms of just Funimation Films works, it seems that they're not too bad actually. It's just their lack of Canadian release for Eureka 7 was their big blunder.
Yeah, I would say so.
And it may expose more of just a brand managing problem at Funimation more than a problem with their theatrical releases. Again, so many factors you can't pin it down. It is worth noting that the My Hero Academia film had a substantially smaller release in Canada than it did in the U.S. To a degree, it's understandable since My Hero Academia is on Toonami in the States and it is not on TV anywhere here. And it's not. I think it's on Hulu in the States too. So the exposure for that series is much wider than it is here. But it is still extremely popular.
It was huge when I went to go see it. I didn't see it the opening day. I saw it a few days later.
Oh yeah.
But it was still a huge crowd. I was really impressed with that movie in general.
Yeah, the crowds were nuts at the Vancouver. They had to add additional screenings.
Oh yeah.
I think I don't know if they got any outside of the one small theater that usually does the anime screenings here, but I know they had to add a bunch because they did not anticipate demand would be as high as it was.
It was pretty big here. Normally we have the one theater that shows the anime movies, but Hiroaka ended up expanding to the other two theaters that are a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And after the initial dates were announced, they ended up going 2 weeks after, I think, here, which was really, really neat to see. I like keeping an eye on those things to see if the movie's a little more popular than they thought. And My Hero Academia was definitely that. It was also a really fun movie. I liked the whole seeing those goofballs in formal wear was great. I really like those costumes. I like those outfits a lot. And the whole mission to save the tower, Die Hard-ish, was really fun. I liked the movie a whole lot. It was really fun. Definitely a good step forward in terms of shonen movies. Because normally they're not the best, but this one was really good.
Shonen Jump films are Shonen Jump action films are something that have been steadily improving over the past few years. I think
Absolutely.
Getting Oda involved in the One Piece movies was a big step forward for all of them.
Yeah.
And then of course Dragon Ball Z Battle of the Gods. I think that more than anything has kind of fundamentally changed the approach.
Those two for sure.
Yeah, they're not doing the 45-minute double feature thing anymore. No. They're definitely putting more of a individual effort in each film. Speaking of Dragon Ball Z, did you go to the Broly double feature?
I do not like the Broly movie at all. I like the second one, the second Broly movie, a lot more. But the first one I think is just hot garbage. So I didn't even think of it.
Yeah. That got a decent release, from what I gather. And of course, all appropriate steps are being taken for that new Broly movie. It's worth noting that the Dragon Ball, this goes for the US as well. I'm still surprised that the Dragon Ball Z film, the new animated Dragon Ball Z film, is getting less of a large scale release than Your Name did last year. Because Your Name got it wasn't it wasn't the type of event where they just purchase out the theaters for individual days like they seem to be doing with Dragon Ball Z. It was an actual proper theatrical release, a small, not a wide release, but a limited wide release.
Yeah.
But they can't do that for Dragon Ball Z Broly. That I can't wrap my head around that.
I can't either, especially Dragon Ball has almost never been more popular than it has right now. Not for almost 20 years, I'd say. And the fact that it's getting the release that it is insane to me. Actually, Hiroaka, the first showing I tried to go to, ended up being sold out, which was a nice surprise. And Broly is absolutely going to sell out.
Yeah, Broly, I think they're all. I was looking at the Cineplex listings last night, and they don't seem to actually specify when a screening is sold out anymore. I think the listing just disappears now. But it looks like it is selling out quite predictably. I still haven't seen Dragon Ball Super, so I don't know if I'm going to go see it myself. But,
I've seen enough of Super to get the gist of it. It's real impressive. Having not being constrained by a manga format has really done wonders for the series in general, and having like that tournament that ended the Super was so good. Yeah. And it just brought so many people back into it. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah. I just want more stuff like, Vegeta stuck in traffic with his kid screaming in the back seat. Kind of stuff. Like, that's what I want from Dragon Ball.
That Dr. Slump episode was really good.
Yeah. Even though it creates huge continuity problems with the Dr. Slump appearance in the original Dragon Ball, though. Yeah. But let's not overthink that. Yeah. Also, we're going to be doing a Dragon Ball retrospective soon, and I'll get into that when we do that. I think that covers it for Funimation, though. I guess we're kind of breaking this down by distributor.
Yeah, I guess that's what we're doing.
So Attack on Titan premiere. Did you make it out to that one?
I did not, because I was going to see it. I was going to see it on TV or on Crunchyroll anyway. Yeah. It wasn't something that I really wanted to go out of my way and pay extra money to go see. But I think Attack on Titan is fine.
I'm way behind in the anime and manga on that.
Nice.
Just in terms of, I know that those screenings did well. That's another situation like the My Hero Academia one, where the Canadian release, even when you look at it proportionally, was much, 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 much smaller in Canada than it was in the U.S. In Vancouver, it screened only in one theater, whereas like in equivalent cities in the U.S., you were getting you were seeing it pop up in like suburban theaters or multiple theaters in one city. So it was massively scaled back compared to the U.S. release, and that release was done by Crunchyroll.
Yes,
I don't know.
They also did the Bungo Stray Dogs movie, which I didn't see as well, because
that was the only other thing from Crunchyroll that we got this year. That was, I think, in early April, where they picked Bungo Stray Dogs. We did not get, between Attack on Titan and Bungo Stray Dogs, we did not get the Cardcaptor Sakura movie 2 release.
No, we didn't.
That was around the same time as Eureka 7, and I think that was a similar oversight. Why to not do a U.S. or a Canadian release of that film, I think, was a huge mistake that, again, signifies some bad branding decisions.
Yeah, that one, that was a big disappointment for me as well. Like, I actually had forgotten about that until you just brought it up, and I was like, I was really upset about that when that happened.
Yeah. Having that and the Eureka 7 movie skipped over in Canadian theaters, both at the same time, that, to me at least, that's just like, oh man, they're just not doing any market research here anymore, are they?
No.
Yeah. So we didn't get anything else from Crunchyroll in terms of what we missed from them. They did that the Yuri on Ice event where they screened every episode of Yuri on Ice. That got quite a wide release as a Fathom event in the U.S. I believe. And again, U.S. only, not in Canada. Big missed opportunity on that one. Oh, that actually reminds me, one other Funimation film we did not get was the free Timeless Medley.
Oh, true, yeah.
A similar bungle. I have no idea why they would think not releasing that one in Canada was a good idea, but again, it just goes back to, they're doing this stuff through Fathom events in the U.S. It's extra effort to have to put together a film distribution in Canada. And they're just making these questionable calls about whether or not bothering with Canada is worth it. It is never a city by city thing. Is this a big enough release that we can include Canada, which is at the bottom of the priority list, regardless of what city you're looking at or not. I think we're getting some. Again, it's one of those questionable decisions.
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, so we didn't get Free, we didn't get Yuri on Ice, and also the Mob Psycho 100 season 2 premiere. Technically 2019, because I think it was a couple weeks, or it was just this past week. But that's another one that we got left out on. So I think with Crunchyroll, it's looking like we're not going to be getting very much stuff from them moving forward. At least I'm not seeing any indication that they're going to be making any kind of push for this kind of stuff here, because why it's especially the television episode premieres, they're pretty frivolous to begin with.
As far as those episode premieres go, I'm not super interested in them unless it's like at least more than a month away, and even then, depending on if I'm excited for the series or not. The only one of those I've seen was I went to the Ancient Magus Bride premiere, which was fun. That was last year. But as far as Crunchyroll goes, that's about it from them.
Yeah, definitely. I think a bad move skipping out of the Yuri on Ice thing. That more so, I think, is a sign that they're not. They're not. They don't really have much of an interest in doing theatrical events in Canada.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, keep an eye on that. On that stuff, but if you hear about a show premiere happening in theaters in the U.S., I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that you're not going to see that happen in Canada as well.
Yeah.
Maybe Attack on Titan if they do one for season 4, but not keeping high expectations on that.
We did get a new distributor for movies this year, who did one. Cinelife Entertainment did Sailor Moon the musical, Le Movement Final.
Yeah, very wisely not skipping Canada.
Yes.
I think there was a little bit of a delay and a little bit of concern when that was announced, but they pulled through for us in the end.
Yeah, that was one that popped up on the Facebook ads for Cineplex events too, which I found pretty interesting. I've been a big fan of the Sailor Moon musicals forever. So seeing one on the big screen was like a dream come true for me. I think towards the end of it, the audience kind of started revolting against it a little bit, just because the characters just won't kiss. They'll look deep into each other's eyes and then just hug deeply, which definitely got the audience riled up by the end of it. But that's just stage musicals in Japan. I thought it was a great end to that musical series. I would love if they did more. I don't know if they will. The crowd was very good. It ended up screening in more than one theater here, and in both the audience was pretty full. I'd say at least half full. I don't know if more will happen after, just depending on what the audience is like.
I mean, Sailor Moon is pretty evergreen as far as those live action musicals go. So I imagine we'll see more. It's funny that this one was the end of that series, and it was the only one we got. Yet it's still, pulled in a crowd and got people excited.
I would say, especially because lots of people hadn't ever seen the Stars arc ever before. Yeah. And this is like a very big adaptation of the manga version of it, as opposed to the anime version, which would be very new to a lot of people. I loved the hell out of it, honestly. I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, Sailor Moon Crystal will be getting theatrical releases sometime 2019 or 2020. I think that next arc is really up in the air. But the Dead Moon Circus arc, but we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it at this point. It's been a while, which is disappointing because the Sailor Moon Crystal 3 was really good. Yeah, and I just want to see more.
On that note, Viz did release some films.
Yes.
They started the year with the Mazinger Z Infinity film, which was I was very surprised at first to hear that this got a theatrical release at all, because literally what mainstream audiences do not care about Mazinger Z in Canada or the United States, and they have little reason to, because the localization, English language localization, was never widespread for that series. We did not get that one in Canada.
No.
And I have not seen the film. I don't really like the visual style they've taken with it. I think it's the wrong approach for something like Mazinger Z. It does make for nice model kits though, which might be the more important thing. But I did actually, when I heard that this release in most U.S. cities was extremely popular with Hispanic audiences, that kind of brought it a little more into perspective of why Viz did that release in the U.S. and maybe kept it in the U.S. only, just due to that audience, because of course in Mexico and South America, Mazinger Z was very popular. It did take off there, and I think a lot of that cultural popularity has fallen into the U.S. as well. So again, that case kind of understandable that we didn't get it, but still, kind of sucks. Like you just know that like a year or two ago we probably would have gotten that film, but not in 2018.
Nope.
Also from Viz was of course the Sailor Moon. They did two runs for the old Sailor Moon films. They did a double bill with the was it R and S, and then
it was R and S
Supers?
together, and then it was R and S, and then it was Supers and the Ami-chan's First Love special.
Okay.
I have a story about this. I went to go see the R and S movies at the big theater, because there's a small theater that is newer and has like a VIP theater, and that's the one that most of the anime goes to. And then there's the theater that's the most popular, which is where the bigger anime shows as well. I went to the big theater because I thought like, a bigger crowd's gonna be fun. And they started playing the movie, and it started out with Ami-chan's First Love, and I thought to myself that it was odd, and maybe it was just they were playing it before both of them. It turns out that they just messed up the screeners. So they ended up playing the Supers movie 2 weeks in a row instead of the R and S. So after watching Ami-chan's First Love, which was really great to see on a big screen, even though I had to leave partway through to tell them that they were playing the wrong movie, then the Supers movie started playing, and I realized for real that we were being shown the wrong one. So I ended up speeding over to the other theater in time for the S movie, because that's the one I actually wanted to see.
Oh.
And I ended up getting
they would not. The theater you were at would not correct their mistake.
No, because they didn't have the other file ready to go. So I ended up having to speed over to the other theater, and I luckily got there just in time for the S movie to start. The S movie is still my favorite Sailor Moon movie because of it's a manga plotline that was adapted to a movie, largely focused on Luna. So it was really fun to watch that on the big screen. It's also where the tuxedo mask dress as Santa comes from.
Yep, everyone's favorite Sailor Moon gif.
Which is one of my favorite Sailor Moon moments of all time.
It's so great.
And then the week after, we had just come back from a cabin, and I was feeling too sick to actually go see the Supers movie. Which is okay because I've seen it before and it's not my favorite.
Yeah. It's notable that those Sailor Moon screenings, they actually, I think, were day and date with the U.S.
Yes.
The drawback of that, though, is that they were announced in Canada much later than in the U.S., so they were quite short notice. I imagine they were still very successful and popular despite being short notice.
Big time.
Also, they conflicted with almost every major anime convention in Canada. I think there was direct conflicts with Anime-thon and Anime Revolution and Otaku-thon with those. So, again, some not really doing good research in terms of release strategy.
Yeah, that happened. That happened to Winnipeg and Makia.
Yeah.
It played only one day, and that was the Saturday of our con. And since I was working at the con, I couldn't go see it, which killed me, and I still haven't seen it to this day.
I thought you did make it up to see Makia.
No, I still haven't. But we are. Icon is working with 11 Arts, and we are going to be showing Makia at our winter event which means I get the screener ahead of time, so that's going to be fun for me.
Yeah.
We're also going to get Liz and the Bluebird to show, which is going to be fun times.
It's good that they're sending that to you because I think, as I mentioned earlier, Liz and the Bluebird was a film where they promised a U.S. and Canadian release and never delivered on the Canadian release, I suspect because they were trying to get, 11 Arts was trying to get it out in Cineplex and failed and didn't have an appropriate backup plan.
Yeah, and I would say the fact that they're licensing it out to a con like us means that it's not going to get a theatrical release at all, which is pretty disappointing.
It is very disappointing, especially since I have not seen it. Actually, a funny thing about Liz and the Bluebird, when I realized that Cineplex wasn't going to show it, I actually contacted the Van City Theater in Vancouver and asked them if they'd be interested in showing it. And then, like 2 weeks later, it popped up on their schedule because they had listened to my request.
Nice.
Unfortunately, I was not able to see it on either of the days that it was scheduled because it was at like 1:50 p.m. on a Wednesday and a Thursday.
Right.
And I'm not sure how well it did. I think it, like, at least for the times that it was playing, I think they did well, but I haven't seen any news of additional screenings being planned. Oftentimes the Rio Theater in Vancouver will pick up a film after Van City Theater runs it. That hasn't happened, so I don't know what's going on with that. But that was so far the only screening that film has had in Canada, and it was in my city and I couldn't see it. So that that really stings. And again, that's another case where a company had promised a Canadian release. On social media for weeks they were saying the Canadian release is coming, and yet produced no evidence whatsoever that a Canadian release was in the works. And then now that Vancouver screening has happened, I guess that technically fulfills their promise. So I don't think 11 Arts is going to be going through the effort of getting any kind of screening, which really sucks. Like, I don't know. And actually, we saw this happen more with G Kids throughout the year, I think.
Yes.
With G Kids, they would, again, they're working with Fathom Events in the US more now, which means that to get a release going in Canada, you either have to strike up a deal with Cineplex or you have to talk to individual art house theaters. I don't think G Kids got anything out in Cineplex.
They did. Which is unfortunate for Winnipeg because we only have one independent theater, and they really do their own thing. I'm trying to get more in contact with them through Icon, and we'll see where that goes. But at the moment, it's real rare when they get an animated show. But Cineplex did get Mary and the Witch's Flower in the start of the year.
Oh, that's right, they did.
Which I went to go see, and I found it to be a perfectly serviceable children's movie. I thought the animation was fun. I liked parts of it, and I found lots of it to be just a little too childish for me. But it was fun to go and see what was happening next with Studio Ponic and that whole thing. I found it just a little too silly for me.
Mary and the Witch's Flower, it was playing at independent theaters for quite a while in Vancouver, so I think I missed the fact that it did hit Cineplex as well, which is good because that's exactly the type of movie that should be going into Cineplex no matter what.
Definitely.
And I haven't watched it yet. Worth noting, it's on Netflix now.
Yes.
It was actually, this was kind of weird. It hit Netflix in the U.S. about a month and a half before it showed up in Canada. We did get it in December finally, and the reason for that delay apparently was because someone, probably Netflix, was funding a French-Canadian dub for it, and when it hit Netflix in Canada, it included that French-Canadian dub by Cinelume. So if you want to watch it in French, you can. I find that very weird. I think that's the first time I have seen that happen, where a release was delayed here because someone bothered to dub it in French. Yeah, so as far as G Kids goes, we're also, I know Modest Heroes, it played at a small animated film festival at the Van City Theater in October, but its wider release is happening in the next few weeks in the U.S. But there's been, for that one, for a Studioponic film, there's been no word on any kind of Canadian release, wider Canadian release for it right now, which I find a bit troubling. Maybe I shouldn't worry about it because again, it's a sort of, Studioponic is the Neo Studio Ghibli. So, I mean, if anything from G-Kids is going to get a wider release in Canada, it's that. But there's been no sign of it yet. So I don't know what to think of that. I'm
not holding my breath out for anything that doesn't explicitly look like Ghibli. Yeah. From G-Kids. I appreciate what G-Kids is doing, but they just don't have the connections with the big theaters that 11 Arts does, which is odd. I think it's again the Fathom thing. Which is unfortunate because
G-Kids was using 11 Arts for, that's kind of where they both started. Is that correct, or am I mistaken on that?
I'm not entirely sure. I think you're on the money there, but I could be completely off base.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because lots of the G-Kids movies that have come out, I ended up catching. Well, I actually only caught one other. I caught Lou Over the Wall because we were screening it at our con. And I found it just to be a huge delight. It out Ponyo's Ponyo.
Yes.
That it's that's very, very good. The animation is fantastic. Yuasa can do no wrong. And I really enjoyed watching that.
Yeah. Lou Over the Wall is one that they did not get it out in Cineplex films. I think that's one that really should have been in Cineplex theaters. I know that it seems like every major director is trying to get a family film out right now because apparently Your Name sparked this big rush to get different family films out, and that's kind of puttered out now a little bit. But Lou Over the Wall is something that I think it did open in most of the major cities in Canada, but again, it wasn't the type of Cineplex. No. It didn't get like a Cineplex push, which it probably should have. Yeah, I did. That film was very delightful. I liked it a lot. I do think the best standout moment was kind of the old timey cartoon style dancing that was in the middle of the film. I think that's kind of that part kind of went viral on social media earlier. That is the best part of the movie, but it's well worth seeing for sure. I can't say it was the best Yuasa thing this year, but I mean, how many things from him have we seen this year alone?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't see the other big movie, Night of Short Walk On Girl.
Well, yeah, because that literally only opened in Vancouver.
Yep.
It did screen at Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal, but I think that was like over a year ago, and it was completely separate from. Yep. I don't think G-Kids was even involved with that. That Night of Short Walk On Girl. If I were to pinpoint any theatrical release this year where the ball was dropped in a catastrophic manner, it would be Night of Short Walk On Girl from G-Kids. Like, I don't know what the fuck happened there. G-Kids has claimed on social media that they had been offering it to theaters across Canada. Obviously, there was no Cineplex deal for that one, which left them to try and do an art house run. I cannot believe that Van City Theatre and Rio Theatre in Vancouver, and actually the Nikkei Center in Vancouver, is doing another screening for it in early February. So again, a third screening that is only in Vancouver. Yeah. I cannot believe that Vancouver theaters are the only ones who are interested in screening that film.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
I don't believe it. I cannot believe that.
No. And it was especially disappointing because it was playing in that theater the day I flew back home from Vancouver.
Yeah, you were in Vancouver. If you had known like a few, like just a little, I think it was announced that the screening was announced like after you had booked your flight.
Yeah, it was.
And planned your trip. If it had been timed a little differently, you could have stayed and caught one of the Vancouver screenings for Night is Short. And I feel very sad that you couldn't, because that movie was awesome. It was one of my favorite movies of the year, just period. And it kind of makes me very sad that people across the country couldn't have seen it. I mean, the home video release is coming out in a couple weeks.
Yes.
I say just blind buy it. It is so worth it. The movie is it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. I think it is. I think it's Yuasa's best film, personally. And also on that note, if you haven't seen Tatami Galaxy, also watch that. Unfortunately, it's been pulled from Crunchyroll now, but I don't know if it's locked down on Funimation. You need a subscription for it, but
I would think not.
Yeah, but check it out. It's so good. And yeah, that's really where the release of Night: A Short Walk on Girl is where I feel that thing. Like, it was just kind of up until that point around July, it was just kind of a disappointing year for July, August. It had been a disappointing year for anime theatrical releases in Canada. Night: A Short Walk on Girl is the big red alarm that something is going seriously wrong here. I kind of feel that this is a collective failure of like every company at every level. Because obviously Cineplex is choosing not to take these on. Yeah. So obviously there's some degree of blame there. Obviously, I mean, if it's true what G-Kids has said, that they're offering it, that they offered it to theaters across Canada, or tried to push it to theaters across Canada, then I mean that's a bit of a failure of those independent theaters, because I can't imagine every art house theater outside of Vancouver turning this movie down. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. This is like catnip to those types of theaters. They should all have been all over it. It was also kind of the fault of the Japanese licensor for Night: A Short Walk on Girl for giving G-Kids a hard time with it, because it was actually a 2017 film and it got massively delayed. That may have factored into it as well. I don't know. But yeah, that just seemed like a total failure on every level, and we're seeing more and more of that happen with other distributors. But G-Kids seems to be where it's most notable, because they have most of the major films, and their efforts seem to be getting lesser and lesser.
Yeah,
as time goes by.
It's real disappointing, especially from a company who does like these very big Oscar pushes for lots of movies. To not have them available wherever you can is a big problem. Yeah, it's disappointing. G-Kids also put out Fireworks this year.
Oh yeah, that was in Vancouver and Toronto only. Although I don't think many people are going to complain about that.
No,
based on what I've heard about that film.
Yeah, the main theme song is fantastic.
Oh yeah,
but
you can watch Japanese commercial compilations from the time that film came out in Japan, and you'll get everything you need.
Yeah.
Because it keeps popping up in every commercial. It was like inescapable for those couple months.
Yeah, but I hope something happens with G-Kids and they find a good distribution deal for Canada. Hopefully through Cineplex, since that's the only main theater chain for me anyway.
I mean, there's Landmark. I'm guessing they do not have a location in Winnipeg.
We have at least one Landmark.
Yeah, same here. We have one in Metro Vancouver.
Yeah,
and I think there's maybe one in northern BC.
Yeah, they've converted lots of their theaters to these extraordinary seating options with with very, very comfy chairs. But
yeah, Landmark's great. If you have a Landmark near you, that would be that's my chain theater of choice if I go to a chain theater.
Yeah, it was real nice. I was impressed. I went to go see Suspiria there.
Oh,
and I had a great time. Yeah, the new one. Oh, yeah. Great movie.
I know that Crunchyroll had a deal with Landmark, I think last year. That's where they did Megas Bride, was it not?
No, that's where they were going.
They did the Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress.
Yes.
With Landmark. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact how these deals work, but I'm surprised that more companies haven't at least tried to get Landmark. It feels like they're not exploring all their options.
No.
Because I know Cineplex basically has a monopoly, but
they do.
Yeah, but I mean, like there are other options. Like, come on, like these companies need to try. They're just not trying. They don't want to try. It's like if they can't make Cineplex work, it's like if they can't make Cineplex work, it's not worth trying. And
Yeah.
I think that is not the mentality that the companies responsible for distribution of these films in Canada should have.
No.
Something needs to change there. Something needs to change with the mentality behind how it's all handled. With G Kids, there was also the Perfect Blue release.
Yes.
That was in Vancouver and Toronto. One theater did do it in Toronto. I don't believe anyone else picked it up, which is also outrageous.
God, I would have killed to see that.
Yeah. See, the Rio a few years ago did a bootleg screening of Perfect Blue, which I did catch, and I'm not against that because I remember when I went to that screening, the theater was it was like a midnight screening, and the theater was filled with people who had never seen it before. So it exposed that film to a whole bunch of new people, and I think that was fantastic.
Yeah,
even if it was unauthorized.
I cannot wait for that Blu-ray to come out. Yeah, God.
Oh man, talk about a long anticipated release.
Yeah, because
right
that old DVD is such garbage.
It's like it's like the worst of manga entertainment all in one package.
It really, really is.
You can't even watch it on a widescreen TV because it is letterboxed.
Yep.
Similar to their End of Evangelion release.
Yep.
But with Perfect Blue, I did, because it was just such a great experience seeing it at the Rio that first time. I wanted to see it again in a legitimate context, and I could not get in. They had two screenings. And they were packed completely. The theater was overflowing with people, and these weren't like anime fan people. They were film goers, like people who go to film festivals and stuff. Were just lined up out the door.
Yeah.
And I had no hope of getting in.
That makes sense to me with the reputation Satoshi Kon has.
Exactly, and it is worth noting that Van City Theater, to their credit, I think Van City Theater. They're the only theater I've ever really communicated with about anime directly. So I can't speak for theaters in other cities, but their commitment to anime it seems to be very good. They're willing to give anything a shot. And I think a good sign of that is the fact that around Christmas time they ran Tokyo Godfathers. They actually licensed it.
Wow.
Sony still has that, right?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, I believe Sony still has Tokyo Godfathers and Paprika.
When Van City Theater screened Tokyo Godfathers, it was the original Destination Films release. They used, one of the source materials that they used for the very limited theatrical run that movie got.
Wow.
Back then, it had the Destination Films logo play at the beginning, and I think the Tokyo Godfathers was that has to be one of the last films that was actually released under Destination Films.
Oh, yeah.
Through Sony. I was just very surprised that they went out of their way to get it. It also had the original, of course, those same original subtitles that were used from the DVD, which I have to say those subtitles have not aged well.
No. I can imagine.
Yeah, they use other F word quite a bit in places where I don't feel it was appropriate, especially since that it doesn't really apply to Okama culture in Japan that well. But it was still great to see. Man, I hope Tokyo Godfather. When they announced that they were screening that, I thought it was a sign that maybe G Kids had rescued that film too when it was getting into release. But it turns out that a local theater had just gone out of its way to dig up an anime classic, which I can't really get disappointed about that. But it's too bad that Tokyo Godfathers is still kind of in limbo. I hope it gets a proper Blu-ray release soon. But yeah, still, G Kids could be doing a lot more. Oh, and one other G Kids release, Motherfuckers.
Oh yeah.
Which I believe another one that was only in Vancouver, unless did any other city?
I think it got another city or two. I'm not,
because Van City Theater actually screened it as part of a film festival before G Kids did their release. I think they actually screened the French version. And then the Rio picked it up, the English dub, when that came out. But, yeah, again, very... it actually hit quite a few cities. It looks like it was Alberta, Quebec, and BC.
Yeah.
So, again, not a great release, but it's something. So, but again, absolutely not the type of coverage that film should have been getting.
No.
That it didn't come out in Ontario was ridiculous. So, I think serious problems going on with how G Kids is handling their art house releases, and it seems that if Cineplex isn't playing ball, they're going to have to keep doing things that way, moving on. So I hope that just at least G Kids on an individual level, if any improvement is made with Canadian theatrical anime in the next year, I hope it's just G Kids kind of gets their shit together with that, because they really need to. And up until the end of the year, like going back to 11 Arts, whenever something was licensed by 11 Arts, I always thought, oh, good, that is guaranteed wide, like fairly accessible release in Canada.
Yeah.
Like they had the best track record by far, up until their announcement of Haikara-san Part 2, where they just upfront confirmed, like, yeah, this is not getting a Canadian release. And that was really unfortunate, because it seemed like they were the magical company that could pull anything off. They could get any film in Cineplex theaters, and that is no longer the case. And Haikara-san Part 2, I can understand not getting that one out. It especially sucks with Haikara-san, because the only way you can buy them the only other way to watch them is to buy the home video release. The only way to buy the home video release is through Right Stuff. Yep. So, I mean, like, I don't want to ship something from Right Stuff and pay all those duties just for something I'm probably only going to watch once.
Exactly.
You need to come up with some other solution. Hell, like, see if you can come up with some kind of Canada-only streaming deal. Like, Cineplex has their fingers in streaming platforms. Like, can't they do that as an alternative?
Yeah, you'd think.
Yeah. It's not as simple as I imagine, I know.
No.
But yeah, that Liz and the Bluebird, this is the big black eye on 11 Arts. I love 11 Arts. They generally do a good job. They're the most open. They're very receptive. Like, you can message them on Twitter and they'll probably reply to you every time. But the fact that Liz and the Bluebird couldn't get its promised Canadian release is definitely a bad sign for them moving forward. I hope they can get that straightened out.
Yeah, I'd say
but
so.
It's not looking good.
Speaking of G-Kids, they also did Mirai, which we didn't get here, but it looks like it got a pretty big release in Canada.
So Mirai is interesting, because as with Boy and the Beast, it is a extremely unusual case where the U.S. theatrical rights and the Canadian theatrical rights are separate.
Oh, yeah.
So Mirai was not released by G Kids in Canada. It was released by a company called Mark II Mile End, who I had never heard of until they're apparently Quebec-based. And I think the reason that these Hosoda films are divided is because what I've gathered, I don't know this for sure, but it seems that either the Japanese licensor or one of the top-level partners for distributing Mamoru Hosoda films, they want to make sure that they get French language releases in Canada, making them quite possibly the only company in existence that seems to care about that, which, is good. I think it's great. Mark II Mile End, to their credit, I don't think they did a better marketing job of Mirai than I think Mongol Media did with Boy and the Beast. Mongol Media really did not give a shit about that movie when they distributed it. I don't think they even mentioned it on their social media once. Mark II Mile End tried a little bit with Mirai, which was nice. And they got into it's unfortunate. It sounds like they didn't hit Winnipeg.
They did not,
which is it's a big oversight. But they did hit most other major cities. It seems
Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan, BC.
Yeah. Oh, they got Saskatchewan and not.
They got Saskatchewan, not Winnipeg. Yeah.
Yeah, not Manitoba. That's weird. But yeah, I actually caught the film during the Vancouver International Film Festival. I liked it. I thought it was not as good as Hosoda's first three non-franchise films. It's no Summer Wars or Wolf Children or Girl Who Left Your Time. I did think it was quite a bit better than Boy and the Beast. What stood out to me about it was how, of course, he meets his house has this tree that seems to serve as sort of a link through time that people are able to time travel through. it's not entirely clear. The film does not make its time travel logic clear in any way, which I thought was okay for like its thematic material. Yeah. But his older sister transports from the future for essentially shenanigans. It's not really important. What I thought was interesting about it was how, the older sister, she actually does not play much of a role in the film. She only appears in a few scenes, despite being the title character. But if Mirai were if it were a conventional anime, she would be the main character. The film, or if it were a series, would be about, her various time travel antics, just exploring her own family tree. But the film instead focuses on, her older brother, as a 5-year-old. Mm-hmm. And it kind of feels like they took one of the various adventures that this teenage anime girl protagonist would have, and focused it on the younger version of her brother that she met on one of her journeys, and just kind of flipped it around. It feels like a story being told at the other end of the journey of a main anime protagonist. And it kind of, I think confining it to that perspective is what kind of makes it unique.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I just want to mention one more thing I saw, and that would be Pokemon the movie, The Power of Us.
Yes.
Which I think was Viz released, or the Pokemon Company, one of the two. I actually found this one really interesting. It was animated by Studio Wit, who's the studio behind Attack on Titan. And it was really fun. It was a story with Ash, but also a lot of other characters. And each character gets about the same amount of screen time and gets their own arc. So it was interesting because Ash wasn't really the main character. It was a bunch of people all sharing the spotlight together. And it was just a different way of telling a Pokemon story. And I found that super interesting. And it was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. And Pikachu didn't talk, which was also a point in its favor. Even though I do think Pikachu talking would work in Japanese, does not work in English. But yeah, Pokemon, the movie, The Power of Us, was exceptional, and it's a little disappointing that they're going with a 3D CG movie for their next one.
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, it's going to be theoretically a remake of the Mewtwo movie, but done in 3D CG, which is an interesting step to take, but not entirely unsurprising given the reaction to the Detective Pikachu trailer.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, and also two other movies I didn't mention. I guess you didn't see Big Fish and Begonia?
I did not.
Yeah, me neither. And and of course there was also from 11 Arts, there was Laws of the Universe, the happy science cult propaganda film. Another one that they promised a Canadian release for, but it only opened in one theater in Toronto. I have a hard time kind of complaining about that one.
Same here.
All right, and just to wrap up, Gundam NT has been announced as a Fathom release for 2019, as well as we're apparently going to be getting those new Code Geass movies, and Hunter The Last Mission. What do you think the chances are that we're going to see any of those here?
I think Gundam is a good chance.
Yeah.
I hope and I pray. Hunter x Hunter, I don't think we got the previous one here.
No, I think so.
And I think Hunter x Hunter just keeps going out of cultural relevancy. So I'm not holding my breath for those. Yeah. I do really want to see Gundam though. I hope that somehow makes it to us.
Yeah, we'll see. I keep getting the feeling that Gundam is just slipping away from us more and more. Mm-hmm. But maybe it'll surprise us.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just wrap it up there.
All right.
Randy, where can people find you on social media and online?
You can find me on Twitter. I am twitter.com/Chandyran, ChandyRan. I have recently changed it to keep a low profile since I am now teaching and I don't want people to find my presence, and it seems to have worked pretty well.
And and thanks for tuning in to Zonan Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zonancanada@gmail.com. Theme song is by Ultraclystron. It can be found on his album Packet Flood, which you can find at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, or your podcast app of choice, and leave a rating or review if you have a chance, since it really helps with visibility for the show, especially on Apple. If you know anyone who might like this show, please recommend it to them. See you again.